It was only once I was watching SNL that I'm like, oh yeah, there's a lot of stuff happening in the world in 2000 that wrestling just ignored. Things are going on in the world that are terrible, or whatever. You know, there's the election, the 2000 election with Bush and Gore, and all this stuff, and like, you don't get any of that in wrestling. Like, that's completely like it's blocked off from all of that.
Yeah.
Not live from New York. It's Tales from the Attitude Era. And we're talking about Saturday Night Live this week with The Rock from 25 years ago. It was a very exciting look down memory lane. And to join us on this look, of course, I'm Rob Pasbani, joined as always by former WWE writer Tommy Blacha, who was a guest writer on this episode of SNL. And we are joined by another person very familiar with 30 Rock. You may have seen him on Parks and Rec, on Girls, on his own shows like Delocated and Jon Glaser Loves Gear, or picked up his new album, Jon Glaser's Soothing Meditations for the Solitary Dog, which is out now. Yes, you guessed it. It's Jon Glaser.
Nice. Oh, yeah. Nice plugs.
Really sweet intro. Thank you.
Good. I mean, I could have went even more obscure, like one half of the Forget-A-Buddies, but I leave that for the New York comedy nerds such as myself.
Sure.
And John has been a guest writer at SNL too, so know the workings of that odd place. So, which will some of our, behind the scenes tales I'll tell of this particular episode of SNL, which was pretty momentous and odd from my perspective. You might enjoy some of the stuff that happened.
I'm very curious to hear some of your stories. Yes.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. You go ahead. No, you. I was
going to say before we go, I want to mention that I watched the Peacock version, which was the high quality version, but then I sent the two of you guys the original airing. Like I found like a torrent of the original airing, and there's like a few sketches that were cut, which I found very interesting, which we'll discuss. But what are your just leading into the episode, Tommy? You're a busy guy. You're on the road with WWE. You hear that The Rock is going to be hosting SNL like not too long before this actually happened, right?
It was crazy. Like, we were on the road every week. So Monday we would have a 3-hour live show somewhere, some city. Tuesday we'd go do another city, and then that would be a SmackDown. So my week was insane, and it was just blowing up, and it was huge. I was told like, oh, Rock's going to be a host in SNL. You want to be his guest writer? And it was Marcy Klein, who was, I think Lauren's assistant, like called up and like, okay. And I guess, I just like went off the road for this week. And Monday usually is when the host comes in. So I had like no preparation other than like, oh, The Rock's going to be there. But I had met with like Marcy Klein and Lauren. And I just kind of said like, oh, your ratings are going to be through the roof because wrestling was just blowing up everywhere. It was insane. And I kind of said like, these guys they do a lot more live TV than you think. Nothing's going to freak them out. You know what I mean? Because we've been doing like so much live TV, and they just were like, they do thousands of hours of live TV. They'll be fine. So, that was it. So Monday came in, and Monday's an odd day because the host meets with, the cast and everyone, and they have like kind of a fake pitch meeting, which is kind of always rude to the host, which I didn't really know about. I like kind of knew, but so I went in there and there was a lot of stuff like, and The Rock actually had to wrestle in Nassau that night. So it was like, oh, everything was like, oh, time is of the essence. So then they kind of do all these like pitches, and then everyone says like, well, these pitches are fake because if you get a pitch through on Monday, it gets stale by the end of the week. So everyone puts out their fake pitches, and then they start pitching their real stuff on Wednesday. So as like time was of the essence, I was already like, well, this is kind of a fucking waste of time for The Rock. And he's, and it's kind of rude to the host because they're in there earnestly going like, oh, maybe that's funny. Should we do that? But everyone's like, he doesn't know. None of these are real. And like, well, fuck. Why? But no one wisens him up. You know what I mean? So it's like, oh, that's kind of fucked up, And then it's a very similar place to wrestling because it's very political. And like wrestlers, they're very desperate to be like, is my idea getting over? Am I getting fucking popular or am I done? You know what I mean? But your wrestling character is almost exactly like that. Like, am I getting the cheers or is it over? What the fuck? Am I going to be on next week? Fuck. I'm not on. My career's going, pfft. And an SNL character is the same thing. And also like wrestling, sometimes like, oh, they're reacting to that. more. Oh, it sucks. It doesn't have that much. Kill it. You know what I mean? Things get like, they just blow up and then they just wrench everything out of it till it's like fucking dead. So that's some like similarities.
What are your
Going
John? What are
into
your memories of pitching, or just being in 30 Rock in general, or working at the show?
It was a very brief time. I wasn't there long, so
Mhm.
it's kind of similar to what Tommy said, but I really don't have a lot of experience there. So it was kind of similar, but yeah, I never quite whatever. Yeah, I
But you've pitched on like plenty of other shows in general. Like what is the perfect time? Like when like this is great, this is a great bit. You have to pick the right time to pitch it, right? You can't just throw it out willy nilly because it might get rejected if someone's in a bad mood or something, right?
I don't know about bad moods or anything like that.
I'm
Not at
thinking Vince
least.
McMahon.
Yeah, I don't know. I was very curious. Even just hearing Tommy talk, like I'm certainly curious to hear about. It really depends on the kind of show you're on. Like if it's SNL, I guess I've heard about, yeah, there's that strategy of a fake pitch Monday, and that always felt like whatever. And then hearing stories of people being there Tuesday night till like 3, 4, 5 in the morning, and it just felt like okay. But Conan was different. It depends on the show, but I don't know. I'm
You-
just super curious to hear, like, when you started talking, Tommy, about how it's similar to wrestling. I'm curious to hear, like, are there writers' meetings with how many writers were at?
Well,
Did
when
you?
I was for wrestling, my era was really just a yellow pad of paper, me, Brian Gewirtz, Vince, his son, and there was a lot of like the apparatus was like we had people called agents, which are old wrestlers. So you'd have the production meeting. So you'd run out, do the rundown of the show, and you'd have your promos and stuff. And then agents who are old wrestlers would be like, okay, this match is going to you, this match is going to you, and this match is going to you. And they would fill in with everyone, and they would come back with ideas. So it was similar to Conan in a good way, where there was a whole apparatus. So the pitch isn't that important. So at Conan, like sometimes it's like, I've got a well thought out pitch. Yeah, whatever. And then like, oh, we're under the gun. How about a guy with a beard says this and like, fucking don't put it on and it'll grow because your apparatus is like it might be midnight and like at Conan we'd be like, oh, let's go down to that room. We got an ant, we got a large ant or two, or you have a whole like team that can build something for you overnight. So you have this whole apparatus. So it's kind of some weeks stuff's fleshed out. Some weeks you're like, fuck, we got nothing. We got to fucking pull something out of our ass. In fact, one of our favorite things ever was like it was late at night and we needed to do an act 3 for the next day. I know you remember this. And you kept saying like, okay, a guy in a beard comes out, and then this other writer, McCann, was like, I want to wear these big ears. It was the Be Yourselves gang, if you remember that one. And it really wasn't like, it wasn't even a pitch because we were kind of like, someone pitched something and said like, okay, it's on tomorrow, the Be Yourself, whatever, at Act 3. And then it was at night, and no one was like, it wasn't about pitching anything. It was like, fuck, we got to do something for tomorrow, and it's getting late. And then you start getting like pressure, like, whoa, what the fuck do we do? And then like, I remember you saying like, okay, how about someone in the audience yells at Conan for saying something bad about William Shatner's toupee, and like, you're fake when you wear makeup, but the guy has obviously like a fake beard, and then someone else says you're fake because you've got a beard, and then someone with big fake tits says you're fake, and it goes this weird cascading thing that we just built, and it worked out really funny. I know I'm not selling it very good, but the point is like sometimes wrestling was like that too. Was like, holy shit, we got this fucking match or we got this slot to fill because it's like 2 hours. So not everything's like honed and like pitched. It's like, yep, fucking, we got to. There's something. So things sometimes grow out of control, and sometimes they don't. Then when you work on like sitcoms, that's when it sucks because you're like, oh, let's think about that and let's rethink about that, and we've got a lot of time, and we'll fucking do it, and then we'll replace the good joke with the shitty joke, and everything gets overthought. That's why I like kind of like Conan or SNL and wrestling was like similar to that. Although SNL was a little bit more, I don't know, it was a little more political than even wrestling, because wrestling sometimes you'd go out and if you started to like interact with the fans and get popular, boom, that was it. Where That was kind of similar at SNL, but not really. Anyways, you'd come back for the Wednesday, and then that's when everyone started to be like really like, okay, here's the pitches that have to like go through, and that's why people are staying late because sometimes like if things are like, I don't know, that's not good or whatever. But I had a predicament there, which was crazy, John. It was so funny because it was like Lauren said, I think we want to have some of the other wrestlers come in, and utilize some of their popularity and have them like, hit each other with a chair or something like that. And I was like, oh, that ain't gonna go over, because to them, like, if you have a storyline where you're hitting someone with a chair, it's serious. They're not gonna like just go on and goof at SNL with that. And then like, I told The Rock, like, oh, he wants to, do all this stuff with these other wrestlers, and he's like, okay, well, that's fine, but we're not gonna, I'm not gonna fucking get involved in any kind of physicality or our storylines. So I called up Vince and I said, like, well, we got a problem here, because Lauren was like really kind of insisting on that. So Vince came down with like Mick Foley, Triple H, and the Big Show, and they're like, okay, well, what are we gonna do? And so Vince is gonna meet with Lauren. And Vince is already so fucking weird. He loves when things are falling apart. He loves chaos. So he comes down the hall. He sees me there, and this is already like Wednesday morning, and I'm kind of like, wow, this is this is already hairy. It's going to be on Saturday. They want to do all this shit, and then Vince goes, "How's that, Lorne Michaels? He's one of those chicken shit producers, isn't he? Huh?" And I'm like, I don't know what that means, but so we go into this meeting. It's me, Lauren, Vince, and Sandy Wernick, this like huge agent, and we're sitting there, and at the time I didn't think anything of this, but Lauren was like eating, he had his lunch there on like a plate, and Vince was like, he's going to me like fucking, he's eating now, it's a real power move, and I'm like, whatever. But then when I think about it, it was like a, he's eating in front of everyone, and then so right when he starts to speak, Vince just leans over and goes, "You gotta eat now." And I'll never forget, like Lauren, he's like literally cutting some meat because he had a proper, like bring a plate up and put a meat wherever it was from on a plate, and and he just like stopped cutting and kind of like you could see in his mind like, oh, I've got to reassess this. And so he's talking, I think it might be good, we're going to have some of the guys come in and do something like this and utilize the whole thing, the spectacle of the ratings and stuff. And then it was St. Patrick's Day, and there was these cloverleaf stickers for some reason on. We were sitting at like there's a huge coffee table on the couch, and that's in his desk's over there. So we're all sitting around this coffee table, and Vince takes one of the cloverleaf stickers and puts it on his nose and just gets real close to Lauren's face like that. And Lauren again like stops, and I'm just like, oh, what the fuck is going to happen? This is fucking crazy. And he's just like staring at him with this cloverleaf on his nose, like with this insane look. And Lauren just was like, kind of like in wrestling, we call it the no sell, like, I don't see you, and then Andy Warnick saying some stuff. And I'm like, so I started going like, well, I think maybe if we could do like an opening thing with the wrestlers, but not really involve them in any kind of like physicality with each other and our own storylines. And then what freaked me out is they all started like they were looking at me, listening to me, like I had the floor, and I'm like, oh fuck, why am I fucking saying anything? I shouldn't have said anything. Now they're gonna that whole thing was like a predicament. So with the help of like Higgins and some people, I wrote the opening, which was kind of like and I made the suggestion, just was a good ego thing. I'd be like, it'd be great politically if you gave Vince the line live from New York. It's Saturday night, because not only he's probably one of the best persons to ever deliver it. I go to probably it'll make him feel good. And then like The Rock was like, yeah, that seems like a good idea. And then so we did that whole opening thing where like, oh, the wrestlers were gonna fuck everything up, but Vince says like, okay, this is good for business, so let's let him have his night. And then we did the thing where like, oh, but in the meantime, I'll beat up this guy, which ended up being like Michael Schur in the.
Yeah, let me go through the summary here. So
okay.
It starts with the cold open is Lauren Michaels and Tim Meadows, longtime cast member. They're sipping on champagne, and Tim says he's afraid the wrestlers will hurt them, the SNL cast. And Lauren said that Vince promised that wouldn't happen. Then we cut to a shot of Vince with Triple H, Big Show, and Mankind. It's almost like a father reprimanding his children to behave. That's kind of the bit. Now we can't do anything violent. And then all the wrestlers like, but can I hit The Rock with a chair? No. But can I, do that? No. No chairs. All right. All right. Big Show, what's that behind you? Nothing. Turn around. He's holding a chair. It gets a good laugh.
No, that was fun because that was actually my idea because I thought like this fucking guy's so big he can hold a whole entire folding chair behind his back like like he's hiding it and like what do you got? Nothing, and then like that's how fucking big he is.
And then there's some really good comedy here. Vince tells them they need to be on their best behavior, and maybe one day, Mick, you could host SNL. Triple H asks, "Me too?" Of course. Big Show asks, "Me too?" Maybe not. And then he does the live from New York. It's Saturday Night line. We get the intro. I'm blown away at how much more lo-fi the intro was to SNL 25 years ago. Now it's like so. It seems like it hasn't evolved much, but when you look back, it's like, wow, these are just still shots with different saturations on them, and now it's like full on like a filmed mini movie. The intro.
Well, yeah, most of that shit you do back then, like, ooh, we'd take, oh, how cool you did this, and now like a toddler does it on a pad. Oh, different looks. Here.
Yeah, you can exactly like
Send
it's
drone,
it's like the most basic iMovie effects essentially.
Yeah, why not? I miss that. I tell you, by the time that thing was over, that was like my job was done because I didn't even like. It just seems like okay, it's just the opening. It just worked. It's fine. You know what I mean? It was colorful. Yeah, everyone got over good. The wrestlers were fine, but that whole fucking thing over those days of just like, what are we gonna do? He wants this, and writing it and getting all those guys together, which they're great, they're easy. Like, what's our line? Like the wrestlers were so used to live TV, but it's kind of weird, like looking at it, like, fuck, okay, it's just an opening, it's fine. You know what I mean? It's not like particularly. It just worked, and it was like, and by the time Vince said that, I was like. Oh, thank God! You're just that's kind of like, but it's like being at Conan too. A lot of things you're just sweating shit live for like even the dumbest shit because you're just like, here's someone in a costume and oh, the fucking ear fell off. Oh, fuck! It takes the momentum out of it. Or fuck, I'm sure you've been in bits where you're like looking at for the cue cards, and if you just like kind of don't find the cue cards immediately, like. If you look at a sketch, like having to have altitude and you're just like, where's the cue card? It's like losing altitude, like sketch immediately 30% less funny and effective just because you looked and then someone who wrote that, like, well, it was written good, but the execution, that's always the thing you learn about sometimes writing the bit, like, well, whatever. And even when I think of that whole bit written out, that whole thing, it's fucking terrible in the sense of like, but he just had to do it. Like, remember, like writing, like, hey, aren't you worried about having these crazy wrestlers on? It's like so like base, but when you really thought of it and went through it, like, yeah, it should be that. You got to fucking sell that to the audience immediately with Tim Meadows or whatever. So you kind of to look at that at a script, like, wow, real fucking rocket science, but it worked. So
How far removed from Conan were you at this time?
5 months.
Oh, wow. So
something like that.
Wow. Not long at all.
No.
It's like
yeah.
October to March, right?
Yeah. On the road, like left and immediately, because I had plans to go to California and then I got sideswiped by just Vince McMahon was the last, like I produced the segment he was on like one of my last days there. And he's like recruited me and I just was like.
At Conan?
Yeah.
That's how you you didn't actively pursue it?
No, it's fucking crazy. Watch episode 1 of Tales from the Attitude Era.
One of my favorite stories you told was likening like just, the sheer stupidity of what we were making at Conan. And I'm guessing similarly with wrestling, like when you come up with the dumbest ideas and then you have to produce them. And you talked about how the panic was still real. The stress was still real, and you likened it to a lawyer who might wake up in a cold sweat in the middle of the night, like, "Oh my God, I forgot this key piece of evidence that's going to keep this guy out of the electric chair."
Right.
And for you, it was like you'd wake up with that same intensity, but like, "I forgot to order the clown wig for the Nazi."
Yeah. It was this like, the red afro.
Yeah.
What's wrong, honey? I gotta get there's no red afro, and the shoot is at 8:30. And yeah.
Also, I want to mention too, like with this, I feel like this was the first mainstream show that, or like the biggest mainstream show at the time that invited wrestlers on. Wrestling had a big stigma in the early 90s that it's just getting out of, as we're talking about on our show every week, because it's so big right now in the zeitgeist. It's the number 1 through 4 shows on cable. And so like all these views. So now mainstream is paying attention, and I feel like this is the most mainstream attention wrestling has got. Like The Rock was on the 70s show, or like some UPN shows or something like that. But this is like truly a big booking for wrestling. And even with that opening sketch, I think what it did really well is it established the wrestlers as legitimate tough guys, as opposed to like actors. I don't know. Like, I think it really put the wrestlers over to the SNL audience. Like these are tough guys, and they're here to play along with us.
Yeah, and it made them like actors too, because it's kind of like, guess what? Guess what? Comedy actors, they can do it too.
Yeah.
In a weird way, I miss when wrestling was looked down upon. There's this weird subculture, because even that 5 months I was there, and you just see how TV and Hollywood works. It went from like my agent being like, "You're gonna go work for wrestling? What? You don't want to work for wrestling?" And everyone like, "That's ridiculous. Why would you know?" And I just like, I don't want to be literally. I don't want to be an old man and never to have maybe seen the behind the scenes of that world when it was more secret. And I just want to do it. I don't know for how long. And then by that 5 month period, it was so blown up. And then at my agent, everyone's calling like, "Can we get tickets to the Staples Center? Oh my God, The Rock!" Ha, ha. And then you just kind of knew from this, like, oh, this guy is gonna like blow up, and he did.
You
And
were only there 5 months. I don't know why I thought it was a much longer.
no, I was there from. I left Conan, and this particular SNL was 5 months later, and then I was there, another like year or so after.
How long did you work at wrestling total? Weren't you there a few years, maybe, or no?
No, only like a bit over a year. I came back and did some things, and did some like English pay-per-views and some things, and kind of had a relationship a little bit, but no, I kind of like, it really was like, marry that girl or leave her, because it's like there's no life outside of wrestling. That's why people are third generation wrestlers. It's just like it's just like so much time. It wasn't like, I'm gonna do this on the side. Although it's a lot different now. Wrestling's mainstream. What's next? Like porn to be mainstream? I guess that's around the corner.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was one of the reasons I left Conan, was like, well, I better leave before I have children. Otherwise, I'm probably locked in.
Yeah.
I wanted to try other things and pursue other things. Um,
No, it's tricky, isn't it? I call it the old 51-49, kind of like 49% of, or at least I was like, yeah, this is great. I'd like to stay here forever and do this, locked in. What a great job. What nice people, what creative outlet. But you get almost creatively institutionalized, because everything you do has to go through that particular format, or you know what I mean? So like you said, like, oh, I want to make a long cartoon, anything, you tend to like, I have to leave, or that's going to bug me too much. Is that how
well,
you
the
were with that?
51-49, yeah, I relate to that completely, because for me, when I started there, like the gap between the awesome stuff, let me keep this in frame, like the
Yeah.
gap between the awesome stuff and the unfun stuff was so wide that it didn't even matter. And then over the years, it just kind of like the gap narrowed, and it was
Right.
never going to go this way. It just narrowed, and then it was always going to just hover here. Like
Yeah.
some days better, some days worse, and it was never, but and maybe if I stayed longer, it would have just become a bigger gap. But that's when I felt like, all right, I've plateaued, and it's still great. I still love it. It's still fun, but there's too much that's not.
It's like, it's the same with wrestling. It's like the business where I ended up leaving wrestling. Well, it was great. There was this competition with the other channel, and we were winning. But at a certain point, when you start to get to that, we're like this, and then in late night, there's suddenly like 5 weird competitors and all this stuff, and then there becomes this insane madness, like at wrestling, like, what's the quarter hour spike? how come and you're chasing ratings, which is insane because you're always like, what do they like? Well, but you just fucking do the best you can and people will like it or not. Like they start looking at the 15-minute spikes and we need to have a surprise here, and you lose your mind and you're writing for this. And in wrestling, there's a term called hot shotting. And it applies to like all entertainment. Like, get something out there, anything to get the ratings now. But in the long run, it does. We won't be here tomorrow. But you know what I mean? Like, so you start to deal with that, and I think so many shows do that, and you see it, and that's where the term "jump the shark" comes from, and all that, where you're like, oh, now it's miserable. You know, it's quickly like because like the other channel has fucking Late Night with JoJo. I don't give a fuck. It just
Late Night with JoJo was good though. It was funny,
yeah.
smart. JoJo was a great host.
Yeah. It was late.
Irreverent.
It was at night. It was great.
So The Rock comes out to do his monologue, gets a Rocky chant, a very different than typical SNL monologues. Since he's not using his rock voice, like his wrestling promo voice, I feel like his Southern accent really comes out here, which you could really tell he's taken some lessons in the time since to like, play that down and have a more nondescript accent. But he just sounds like someone from Tennessee here. He joked that he injured Tracy Morgan in rehearsal. It's very weird to do a recap of a comedy show the way I do it of a wrestling show, but I'm going to try it. And so he's doing his bit, and then
it's awful. But go on.
Big Show, Mankind, and Triple H arrive. They chuck two fans out of their seats and say, oh, these are our seats now. And then Triple H ends up sitting on the stairs, but the blocking is necessary because Triple H eventually gets down to the stage. They do a cool over-the-shoulder shot over the wrestlers watching The Rock, which is pretty cool. You don't really see that angle on SNL. And The Rock says, people tell me I look like a sexy Rob Schneider. Deuce Very Bigelow, which, what a reference for the like, who would reference Rob Schneider nowadays? But at the time, kids, it was a very relevant reference.
Well, it's just like we were talking about all the awful, like, be topical, and then you watch shit like, it's always when you're topical, stuff doesn't age, and you look at it and like, oh, that was awful.
We're watching wrestling week to week here on the show, and what blows my mind is what a bubble wrestling is in that I didn't realize until watching this SNL show, because like things are going on in the world that are terrible or whatever. There's the election, the 2000 election with Bush and Gore and all this stuff. And like, you don't get any of that in wrestling. Like that's completely like it's blocked off from all of that. It was only once I was watching SNL that I'm like, oh yeah, there's a lot of stuff happening in the world in 2000 that wrestling just ignores.
Yeah, it's cloying. That's the hard part of like you were talking before, even working in late night comedy and shit, just like servicing that topical shit is just like, oh, sometimes it's just like, it's brutal.
Tom Agna, who was a former Conan writer, he was there before me. And when I got hired, it was funny to talk to guys that had been there a while and we're all just like, beaten down by the schedule but I was talking to him at a party. And he's like, so how are you liking the job? I'm like, oh, it's great. Like I just started. It was all fun. And I said, yeah, the celebrity stuff is not my favorite. The topical stuff's not my favorite. And he summed it up perfectly. He said, yeah, that stuff's like trying to take like being told, like, go take a shit when you don't have to. You quite literally do not have to take a shit, but you have to like go take a shit. There's nothing to come out of me. You got to do it anyway. Okay. It really is just, I started writing Gary Busey jokes just to amuse, because I'm like, I can't write this garbage like celebrity jokes. And we'd come up with good ones, but there was so much bad. I'm like, why can we just stop doing these? They were so fun.
No, it was tough. That's why I think you're the same as me. Just like always try to like come up with off the wall, just weird shit. That's so fucking weird. Sometimes I'd be pitching shit that could never be on, but then hopefully someone could like twist it into something else. But you just wanted to keep the energy level up of like, how about this? How about that? And then, but most time you're like in such a dark mood. So you're like, I remember like Greg Cohen once pitched. Just like he's like, how about there's like a raccoon comes out in a little car and it says rape on the side, and just everyone's like, just, well, we're just too fucking burnt or something. It's just like, I don't even know if that made it Conan, but it was like, that's not gonna happen. But it's funny visual, but just keeping your hat in the ring.
Yeah, that part of it, I never felt that at Conan. It was, a smaller room than SNL. It didn't feel as desperate to get something on.
Yeah,
It's a nightly show, so you've got plenty of opportunities to get stuff on as opposed to the pressure of once a week.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I do remember from that week, the couple times I did it, people trying to just get their initials on something so they could have a sketch on the air.
yeah.
And it just felt like such a bummer of a way to
No, it's really tough because
creatively.
people then try to align themselves with something and then a character, and there's so much like, there was even like I remember in this, The Rock said like, "Oh, I like to do with maybe a sketch with Mary Catherine Gallagher." Was that the
Yeah.
Molly Shannon?
Yeah, Molly
And
Shannon.
then there was like, and I won't mention, but there was like a little wave of kind of like, "Oh, The Rock doesn't know, we don't do that one anymore." Kind of like, well, fuck. How's he supposed to know? And I was like fucking like pissed for him kind of as his representation. Well, like, don't fucking bag him because that's persona non grata now, or sketch non, you know what I mean? I don't know these fucking inside politics. And it
Yeah.
just, it's a mind fuck. It's just like, yeah. And there's people that have just disappeared and and whatever. So it's a weird place like that. But that is similar to wrestling. There's people like that are like, I got to get a fucking new gimmick, or here's my gimmick, and oh, I was this guy and now I'm not popular, and fuck, am I on? I'm on the sheet. Fuck, it's a very similar deal.
Yeah, it's like Boogie Nights when the new guy comes in and it's just you could feel that like, wait a minute, what? It's a really yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
So the sketch ends with Triple H jumping down. I guess The Rock made some joke about how we're all nice guys, even that loser Triple H. We're all classy. And then Triple H is like, hey, wait a minute. I should be the one hosting the show. Out of respect to the WWF, I just want to say, break a leg. We're here for you. Have a great show. Mankind and Big Show break character and they start chanting Rocky. And Triple H says he's going to kick Rock's ass after the show. Until then, I'm going to pretend this guy is you. And then he just grabs Mike Schur, creator of Parks and Rec and a writer at SNL at the time, and beats him up. And Tommy, that was initially going to be you, right? And then Tina Fey made the call that you look too cool.
Yeah, I look too cool. No, I had like blonde hair. So I was like, maybe someone like looks interesting and regular looking. Like, okay,
I
Yeah.
remember that look. Yeah, bleached peroxide blonde hair, pretty
yep,
tan,
yep.
fit, hot,
90s, yeah, 90s.
handsome.
Yeah,
Really like,
till
who's this guy?
till I worked for
uh,
wrestling, but it was a good thing. This is like I remember it's the thing where he grabs your hair and you got to hold on to his wrist and then pulls you away. You know,
How did it go well? Did he hurt? Did anyone get hurt?
no, no, they're
Did he
perfect. In
rehearse it a
fact,
few times?
yeah, it was
it,
all
it looked
fine. It's
great.
like, I'm gonna hit you here, you do this, and then I'm gonna grab your hair. Make sure you hold on to my wrist. You hold on to his wrist, and then he pulls you. He doesn't pull you by the hair. So yeah, those guys are so. I mean, they're such pros. It was like no problem.
And I want to note that instead of, we have a great show tonight, stick around. We'll be right back is the typical final line of the monologue, but not when The Rock is hosting. He grabs the boom, which I thought was a cool visual, and he did the "If you smell what The Rock is cooking." We get a commercial sketch, the legendary Tracy Morgan Uncle Jemima sketch, where he's selling malt liquor, and again, I'm just like, I mean, I did watch this as a kid, and I watch SNL religiously, but I just imagine like wrestling fans tuning in, and this is completely a different tone than pro wrestling, but fun stuff.
What was the general reaction from like to the show as a whole from wrestling fans?
You
Oh,
know,
positive, I think. Oh, but go ahead, Tom.
no, I was like, my perspective was we were so fucking busy on the road in 2, 3 cities a week, and it just kept growing. It was like, wow, that's huge. But everything, wrestling was, I think this was like a watershed moment where it was coming out of like, being this stepchild of entertainment that had been around for, 100 years and on TV all the time, but always looked down upon. And this was really, it's like, Oh gosh, it's just as big as anything now because of the cable ratings, and the ratings were like everything. And I could tell by my managers and agents, like, oh wow, and just the opportunities I would get, it was just hilarious. Like, you want to take a meeting with this, you want to take a meeting with that, can you get us tickets to the Staples? And holy shit, and this was crazy, like sitting up there and like it was just bizarre because it was like everything. Wrestling's all about making money and more, just anything popular and you getting it in. But
Well, I
yeah, so
remember
this was
going.
one of them.
You took a bunch of us to, and I'm sure you did this multiple times, but I went to one of the shows at the Garden. I can't remember who it was. Like me, you, I'm sure Richter. I can't remember who
I think
else
it was
went.
Matt Walsh too, maybe, or
Maybe it was super fun. I was never a huge wrestling fan. I didn't watch it, but seeing it live was awesome. Like just the theatrics of it was so, all the big
yeah, yeah,
paints, and just
yeah. That's
so.
a. It's called the very important. It's called the facial. And that's like a thing wrestlers do. You gotta get your facial. So it's kind of when like I beat Jon Glaser to a pulp, and he's not going to be here anymore. 3 weeks later, Glazer's behind me. I've got to have my like, I got to turn and have my look of horror. They practice it, and that's
Yeah, you
because
play
it's
for the last row, basically.
yeah, and it's been around in it's fascinating for forever in arenas. You got the hard camera, so they got it all set up, where like, yep, you got to play to the right camera because some guys would fuck up like you're playing to the wrong camera, like you face your head the wrong way and you're fucked, because there's that moment where you got to be like, is that so? But I remember that one garden show. God damn it, Vince McMahon did the funniest, and it was a bit, but it was very like we wouldn't really talk about it like like fucking comedians would in terms of like doing like a physical bit, but he did the greatest thing. So he's in a wheelchair, right, because he was injured, and he had his two stooges like would come out and do shit for him, and they would be very intimidated by him, and he would always like say like leave me alone. So he got out of his wheelchair, right, and he was like legitimately injured from something, but they played it up, and then he got to the ropes, right, and then he would do this fucking thing, and they just did it like kind of organically. So he did this thing where he's like, "Get off me! I don't need your help." And then he would like start to fall, and they would like rush in to fucking help him and put him back up, and then he would get pissed again, like, "I don't need your help." And then he would like fall again, and they would, and I'm like watching it, like, "Oh fuck, this is so goddamn funny." They're just doing it because they're just so into their characters. And then he tried to like get through the rope, and he looked at the rope like, "How am I going to get through that?" And they were there all worried, like, fuck, we got to help him because he's our boss, but he's going to be pissed. And like they did this whole thing. I think it was just like a house show, but it took like 15 minutes for him to just get in the ring because they kept fucking doing this. And it was as good as like fucking Three Stooges or some kind of physical comedy from the 30s. I was like, this is fucking amazing. These fucking nuts. And but that's just how they've lived their lives, their whole lives. And they just do this shit. You know what I mean? It's not like kind of like, I'm going to do this thing and you do this. Like, you're preparing something for a thing. Oh, yes, that'll be good. They just fucking, they don't want to talk about it. We'll just fucking do it. And shit happens out of like, riffing like that. But I
Is
think
it
that,
is it rehearsed though? Like, do you guys have full on rehearsals and camera
no,
blocking?
nope, there's no fucking time. There's no time. That's the most impressive thing when I went that will blow your mind is guys just, you throw matches together and they sometimes guys don't even speak the same language literally like a Japanese guy and a Spanish guy, and they'll have this match. It's a real shorthand when you see him like talking stuff over, and then you'll go up in there, oh, you do the thing, yeah, I do the thing up top over, okay, I'll fucking do that, and you can do that, and etc.
Even like the big crazy like stunts, like jumping off the thing and smashing into a chair, like those
No,
have to be rehearsed, right?
here and there, depending, but I would say overall you'd be shocked at what isn't particularly rehearsed. Certain like falling stunts, or even like because these guys just let them come up and know like, oh, I do a top rope hurricane run. Okay, we'll do that in the announcers table. Gotcha. Because also you got to remember that whole. It's like a baseball field in a sense where it's like they know the size of the ring. They know this ring that's 7 steps across, and they know what they're working with constantly. Even though they're on the road and in different places, they know like, okay, this is our playing field. So if you look at it like a hockey rink or this or that, they kind of can adapt like that. So they do run I don't want to put it completely like that, but they'll run things through. But like you got to think of their day as like, okay, we show up, we got to go to the gym, there's catering, we get our matches at the after the production meeting, which is usually like 10 or 11. Oh, what am I doing? Okay, I got to hook up with this guy. We might have some interviews, and oh, I don't like my finish. We got to go over it with this. There's so much shit going on all the time. So they're and usually they're like kind of verbalizing it, and sometimes they'll have two or three things. So they're like, oh, can we meet up? And sometimes the old veterans are funny because they'll be like, a young guy will be like, so you want to go over the match? And he'd be like, no, you, I guess I'm winning. Call it in the ring. See ya.
Wow.
Yeah.
Even when, because you were saying earlier, like sometimes they wouldn't hit the camera. Like, do
Right.
they know where generally to be looking? And
Yeah, well, there's always a hard one camera is always in the same spot, and then there's a guy usually, so they're always almost like a stage. They're mostly if you'll notice, they're working to one side kind of. And if you'll notice also, if you kind of watch matches, they always work to the right. They'll hook up and they'll always work to the right. There's little things that you notice like that. So, and then the cameras are great because there's, especially with that money, there's like the camera trucks like it's the NFL, they got two or three cameras. And so, there's certain things that through the production meeting, they might go through with an agent being like, oh, we're going to do this high spot, or this is going to be a big thing. Like, okay. And what's crazy is like, it's one of the few things I've worked for. And I'm sure this is how many times the shows you've done, Adult Swim, this, that, other, you got to deal with lawyers and clearing things, and they're never on your side. It's always adversarial. It always sucks. The only entity, besides if you're on a show that's actually, Conan wasn't like that because it was making money, where the apparatus fought for you was wrestling. Vince is like, do it, fuck it, we'll get sued. I don't care. Anything else was like, oh, you got to change the name of that thing in
yeah,
that cartoon at the last minute. Oh, that's going to cost me money. You didn't,
yeah,
something that no one gives a fuck about.
yeah. That stuff's always infuriating. And then
Yeah.
some always seemed like 9 times out of 10, the alternative you'd come up that was acceptable was worse.
Of
But
course.
in
Yeah.
this glorious way where it's just, or sometimes I'd hear people talking about being strategic about getting certain jokes on where they'd put more attention on something and that would be the one that would go away and you'd
Yeah.
save the joke that you wanted.
Yeah.
Uh, and that's always kind of weird and funny to think about. I had one job where I was able to get on the phone with the standards and practices person and basically talk them out of their decision to not, it was because it was something with puppets and
Right.
there was like one of them was getting shot in the head and we kept calling it a brainstem shot and they said you can't say that. I'm like, it's a puppet. What's the reasoning? And this person just went, well, I just don't like it.
Yep.
I was like, oh, well, if you don't like it, we're going to do it. If there's like a legal reason or whatever,
Yeah.
then tell us. But otherwise, come on. And it was kind of awesome to feel like we did it. We beat them
Yeah.
down with their own logic. And it was so fucking annoying. But yeah, that's just exhausting.
Well, I mean, I know we're deviating from SNL, but who gives a shit,
Yeah,
right?
sorry.
Ah,
No, I'm with you because I have to tell this story. It's so one of my favorite things. I worked on this show, talk show, Orlando Jones. It was like for FX, and they tried to launch a late night talk show, and it was pretty rough going. Then we suddenly had this lawyer on. It was like nitpicking everything, and she was on staff like all the time. Like, what is she doing? So then I would like give her fake shit, but I said like, to just drive her crazy. And I said, like, so now we're gonna have I urge you to kill President Bush dancers. And she's like, oh, you can't say that. And I'd be like, well, I go, no, we're not saying I urge you to kill the president. It's just the name of the dance group. And I would just go, I would just have these like phone calls with her. And she's like, yes, but that's way too, then, and she would like, and I would be like, can you check with your boss? And I would fucking send her on these. And then I'd be like, how about we urge you to shoot the president dancers? And she's like, I don't think that's good either. Just fucking just to fuck with her. And it was like, it's just, everyone was like, yeah, this is great. But it would keep her off the other shit that she would be like so busy. But like,
Yeah.
she actually went and checked with her boss. Can they name a dance group the I urge you to kill president?
That sounds awesome though, man, just to be able to have that freedom and also just to be encouraged
Oh yeah.
I mean, it was certainly one of the best things, at least my experience with Adult Swim. They were like, the weirder the better. And it was,
Yeah.
that's got to be Stranger if you want to do this. And that was always
Yep.
kind of nice.
So, steering the ship back onto SNL. The first sketch with The Rock, which got cut, and I'm like, oh, I wonder why this is cut. It's the Ladies' Man, famous Tim Meadows sketch, and The Rock shows up cross-dressing, which was, I feel like, the theme at the time for the Ladies' Man was whenever there was a big sports star or just like a big jacked guy, they get him in a wig and a dress. Now, if you listen to recent material,
That's more of that pandering paranoia of SNL that wrestling did for, like, oh, do something like this, and then they'll see like, oh my God, The Rock's in a dress.
Oh yeah,
Like
well,
that's the 90% of it.
I believe it's the term is like gay baiting, right? Or I guess this would be trans baiting, or something like that. But it very of its time, and you can see why SNL cut this off the Peacock version watching this, because beyond that, I want to first take a step back, because Cat Williams had a very famous interview like a year ago where he talked about how the deep state or whatever, like the Hollywood deep state would have this humiliation ritual for all black actors where they would make them dress up as a woman. So Tommy, I want to ask you, at what point during the week, was it Tuesday or Wednesday, did the deep state come in and tell The Rock, hey, you want to get into Hollywood? This is your big audition for Hollywood SNL here. You got to wear a dress, pal.
Yeah, that was probably Wednesday. Yeah, the black limo came. What about Giuliani cross-dressed on SNL?
Right.
He
With
loved
Trump.
it. Probably was his idea. He was like all into it. So that's what ended it. His self humiliation.
Even beyond that, though, I think the worst part of the sketch was that The Rock, the idea was that the Ladies' Man didn't realize that this is a man in a dress. He's treating The Rock as a woman. And then The Rock just revealed he has a wife and kids. He's an undercover cop. And then the big punchline of the sketch is that Tim Meadows' character essentially date raped The Rock. He drugged his drink, and The Rock passed out on the Ladies' Man couch. And then the Ladies' Man had sex with The Rock while The Rock was knocked out. Not a clean finish.
Missed the 90s. Not a clean finish.
Not the type of humor you can get away with.
The big
nowadays.
thing too is like, really, it's like, oh my God, how offensive! It must be cut. And then when you watch it, it's like, it's not really offensive. It's just,
yeah, it's bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
But look, this is totally. I mean, we're watching comedy from 25 years ago. Obviously, it's not everything's going to hold up, and it's a topical show, so I forgive it. Then the second sketch is a morning talk show with Sherry O'Terry and Will Ferrell. I didn't understand why this was cut, but then I realized it's because The Rock ends up singing Elvis, so they didn't have the clearance for it. But the bit, it continues the overall SNL bit where the talk show hosts think The Rock is an incredibly violent person, and The Rock is like, oh, that's just my TV character. I'm really, I'm emotional, I read books, I'm sensitive. And then the bit ends with, look, let me show you how sensitive I am. And he sings, Are You Lonesome Tonight? And then Big Show and Mick Foley come and back him up. The hosts come back,
cloyingly sweet crowd pleaser.
Yeah. And then the crowd is just, I'm sorry, the hosts come back and like, oh, I guess they are gentle giants. And Big Show barks, and they all freak out and run off. So it's a nice little tag to the bit.
That one was for Grandma. That's cute.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, these are safe sketches to do. I feel like they would do with most athletes. Like, these are the go-tos. And then after this is possibly the most notable sketch of the event, which is the Mr. Peepers sketch. And The Rock plays Mr. Peepers' dad.
I'm sure maybe there was something we could show off his body.
I was just gonna say, this was for all the fetishists, because The Rock is practically naked here. You see his feet, although he is wearing sandals. I noticed, but
his feet.
I saw
it's going to be in the short. You see The Rock's feet.
This was
something where you can see The Rock's feet.
It's 12:02. Let's see The Rock's feet, please. And then they bust through the wall. After that, we have Weekend Update. A lot of Hillary jokes. This was the moment where I'm like, oh my God, this is the topical humor that is nowhere to be found in WWE. Hillary jokes, the Horatio Sands bit where he draws naughty things as a children's cartoonist, and they end up being animals, which I enjoyed. And there was even an Osama bin Laden joke.
I used to do that same bit personally, but I would just draw, like, I would like talk to someone about, like, oh, let me, well, okay, I'm gonna do a character. Where did you grow up and all this kind of stuff? Oh, what part are you in the? And then it would just be like just a complete hairy cock.
I always enjoyed it when you would do that and you would turn it around and just said, fuck you.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, because I wasn't so great at drawing the cock. Yeah, yeah, that was a little better.
And then we had the ACDC performance. I believe it was Stiff Upper Lip. They were promoting their new album.
This was amazing. This was amazing. This was so fun because the bands, and at Conan, that was a great thing. Just be writing at Conan and like, oh, whoever's, and you'd run down to or you'd run up to 8H and watch fucking bands like rehearse. Could be anyone. This was great. So it's ACDC, and it was me and Vince. Big Show. I think Triple H were just kind of like watching as they're they do a sound check. They do their song, and and again, like, the studio is like, okay, we got it. Here's our camera moves. Pretty simple. And then the singer's like, any requests? And I'm like, whole lot of Rosie. Then they counted off. They fucking played like 3 songs, and it was just like 4 of us like watching, like, and they just took requests and just counted them in. And that was the highlight. That was like, fuck, AC/DC just fucking played fucking 3 requests of mine in a row for 4 of us.
I had when I was working, so when I was still at Conan, one of the fun things, we had so many friends that were at SNL, whether they were on camera or writing, and our offices were a floor above. So because of the way they didn't have crazy tight security at any of these doors yet, and you could just come and go as you pleased, like you.
Yeah, we were on the 6th floor and they were on the 8th floor. Right?
But our offices were on 9.
Oh, you're right. You're right. You're right.
But the story I was going to say was, so when I was there, and it was same at Conan, like, it was so fun to go watch bands you like just rehearse and just sit in the studio and watch. And at the time, when I was at Conan, I had some bit that I did. It was really dumb. It never made it to air. We taped a few. It was just like the bass player that thinks he's in the band. And I just was a guy who would show up at the rehearsal, and they're all like, can we help you? Yeah, I'm here for rehearsal. Who the fuck are you? I'm the bass guy. Get the fuck out of here. Really dumb. And there was one time when Beck played, and his backing band was the Flaming Lips, and they were his backing band, but they were also the opening band on this tour. And so they came in, and we did this bit with Beck, and then the Flaming Lips came back the next day to play as themselves on Conan. They said, hey, and they had all these people in costumes on stage, and they said, hey, come be the bass guy in this crowd of characters. I'm like, sure. And then they invited me to the show that night, which was at the Beacon Theater, and they said, we're going to have you come on stage as the bass guy. We're not going to tell Beck. I was like, okay. And I thought it was kind of funny, but also I'm like, all right, I don't want to, like, it's his show. I don't want to do a thing, because I think they were trying to piss him off, as far as I could tell, or fuck with him a little bit. And so for me, it was fun as hell. Even though, like, because there was a moment where I'm like, is he going to see me? Like, I was kind of hanging back, and this is going to get back to SNL, and this is all set up for an SNL thing where, so I was hanging back near the drummer. Wayne Coyne, the lead singer of the Flaming Lips, is up with Beck, and he's playing. He keeps looking back at me, and he's like motioning me to come up right next to him, and basically stand like front stage next to Beck. And my whole thing is, this isn't, we're not at Conan. This is not my show. I don't want to do something that's going to throw him off and fuck up the show. But I kind of did.
It's really funny though. Could you just imagine, like, a guy with a bass he's never seen on a stage, and what the fuck?
Well, to his credit, when he saw me, because we had already done the bit, so he remembered it. We had just done it the day before. He remembered me from that, and he like kind of stood behind me and did like the rock and roll back-to-back pose. It's hilarious. And then that was it. Stage manager came out, took me off. But I don't know if it was before or after this. So Beck, they played SNL that week. And so one of the keyboard player for Beck said, oh, dude, come by and come do the bass player bit for the show. And I said, oh, I probably could because our offices are right upstairs. I'll go downstairs, and the door in that hallway led to the back of the studio.
Right.
So I could quite literally go in and just be right behind the stage. I think I borrowed an acoustic guitar from Horatio Sands, who was on SNL at the time, and I did it. I'm back there. I see the keyboard player. He's like, okay. And so I sat.
So you didn't like the whole production. No one knew, but
Nobody knew. And so I was really kind of too nervous to go like front and center and just start doing it because I thought the SNL people don't know about this. If they see a stranger just on stage, like security's going to come and fucking tackle me, or who knows what's going to happen.
Sure.
I have friends there. And again, for me, it's like, I don't want to be a distraction. I don't want to have it become a thing. So I kind of just sat in the shadows of the keyboard players.
I don't want it to be a thing, but I did it.
I did honestly, if you were to go back and watch that episode, you would really have to look to see me.
Right.
I really was too scared and not even scared. Like I just felt like if I do a thing where it distracts, it's going to be shitty. It's going to ruin the performance potentially. It's going to take away from that. Like I remember Jim Carrey, I might have been Foo Fighters, whoever it was, he just jumped on stage and was doing a goofy bit, and you could tell nobody liked it. It was rude. It wasn't funny. Yeah. And so I just ended up kind of not going front and center for it. And I'm glad I did that because I feel like if I would have done the opposite, I would have felt like an asshole. But it really was kind of awesome that we could just kind of come and go as we please just to get in the building. And go hang out in people's dressing rooms during the shows. Cause we ended up, or at least I did a fair amount. Like we could get in the building with our ID, go watch the show, and someone's just come and go out of the building. It was great.
No, there was a lot of this. You're at your computer. Hey, you want to go see Elvis Costello? Oh yeah, hold on.
It was awesome.
See, tons of people. Yeah.
Super fucking cool. Yeah.
What were some of the most memorable performances you saw at 30 Rock, whether at Conan or SNL or wherever?
I mean, I loved when Sleater Kinney, they also did that bass player bit, but that was fun to watch them. There was a band that had a little bit of traction, but never became too big or anything, called the Mooney Suzuki. This like really awesome garage band. I just loved them. And they played maybe Conan, maybe they played Fallon. No, they played Conan because I think Fallon came to watch. They were awesome.
I remember getting high with Cypress Hill when they were there, and then at the party, and they're just like smoking. When I say I got high with them, like it was exclusive, they were just at their table at the party with just like full huge blunts and stuff. So that was a blast. That was a good performance.
Yeah.
Before I even worked there, I was at the famous with Blondell, the Chris Farley. Van by the River, the first sketch where he went through the coffee table. That was pretty
nice.
Impressive when you see.
Wait, this is before you were at Conan?
Yeah. We came out for Richter's wedding, Blondell and I, and then we went to, so whatever that was like the year before, whatever, it was crazy. That studio is amazing. Have you ever noticed this? That because it was made for the NBC orchestra, and it has these like diagonal slabs of cement underneath or something. It's acoustically perfect. So you could go in one part of like 8H when you go in there and you see all like the bleachers and they have little, here's where they'll do like a sketch over here. It's not really designed for that. It was for this orchestra, but you can go and kind of like talk across the room in a whisper and you can hear each other.
Oh,
it's like,
really?
Yeah. And bands are in there. Everyone comments like, it's like acoustically perfect, weird, like studio like that.
That's cool as hell.
Wrestling fans love that shit.
We have moving on. Not to bust the party, but we have a Daily Planet sketch. And the joke is that everyone at the Daily Planet knows that Clark Kent is Superman and The Rock plays Superman. They try to kind of...
This was my favorite. It was so stupid, but I kind of was one of those sketches when you're a dorky comedy writer. You're like, how the fuck did no one ever do that before? How many fucking comedy goofballs have riffed like, even when you're a little kid, even probably watching my brother, who's 10 years older, probably watched, Superman when he was 7 in the 50s go like, how can no one know he's Superman? He's just Clark. He's just Superman with glasses on. Like, how did that get all the way to this point before anyone did a fucking Carol Burnett or fucking someone. I'm sure some comedian like, yeah, sure, Clark. It's just like so insanely obvious. It's like,
I like that voice, whatever that was. Yeah, sure, Clark.
yeah, I guess Superman's not around, Clark? You know,
So yeah, they try to trick him into revealing himself by saying like, "Oh, I heard he does this." Like, "Oh no, I don't think
yeah.
so." But then finally, what breaks Clark is they say, "Well, I heard Superman's gay," and Clark says, "Well, just because he experimented in Smallville, that doesn't make him gay." And they're just like, they got a confession out of him.
Busted. Yep. Good
And
old
so that
90s. Busted for being gay.
busted for the
Gay.
joke is haha gay. Then we have another commercial for the Goombas, which is a Sopranos parody. I kind of like this because the joke was just really bad Italian accents. This is also
And
cut off the Peacock version.
was it really? Why?
Yeah,
I wonder.
yeah. I don't know. I'm not really sure. Maybe there was music or something, like a music licensing.
Yeah, probably. Who gives a shit?
Then the
When I when I say I wonder why, my curiosity ends there. Hey, I wonder why that was cut. You'll never know. All right.
Oh, I wonder why. I don't care anymore.
Yeah, I know. By the last word.
I just
uh,
noticed your oldie photo behind you. Oh my God.
Yeah. Oldie Olson.
Wow. Wow. All right, we can get back. Sorry, more tangent.
we're almost done. We have two more sketches. Nicotrell, which is a commercial to stop smoking. And the idea is you assume it's a patch called Nicotrell, but it's actually a human, The Rock, Nick Otrell. And he shows up and beats you up anytime you want to start smoking. So it's Chris Parnell and I forget who played his wife, but they're just kind of doing a confessional commercial. And like, I've actually stopped smoking because I'm using Nicotrell.
Well,
And then,
it's good. The Rock can be physical and he can beat someone up. People like to say
right, that was the thing, right? You got the wrestlers guy, and then the
Nick Atrell.
climax of the bit is that the other wrestlers show up and they break the fourth wall, and they're just like, "This is how you're like beating him up, like you're doing it wrong. You got to do it like this." And then like Big Show and Mankind beat up Chris Parnell, and he's crying for his life, like, "No, please, no!" And it's clearly
It was very meta. Very meta.
SNL loves that kind of stuff.
Yeah. They were
Very
they were
SNL.
so high on like get those guys in there and get them to be physical. That's I said that whole thing in that opening sketch was like trying to talk them down out of that, and you know what I mean. And
Yeah, I was very surprised how much they went to breaking the bit. Like the joke is over. Let's just like get meta and do something silly. Like
Yeah.
it was way more wrestling than it was SNL in a way.
Yeah, they were chasing the rating. That was all.
Yeah.
The more of them. Yeah.
One thing I wanted to ask Tommy is how did you decided on these four guys? Obviously, these are the four guys in the WrestleMania main event, but
Right.
the main event wasn't official yet. Like Mick Foley wasn't officially put in, but I'm guessing by now you already knew he was going to be there. Like, why did you decide to bring in Mick Foley for this? Do you remember?
Just because he's such a good talker and he's actually funny, and also he's like the guy that could potentially, before even knew exactly what was going to happen, he's one of the few guys. He's very smart, and he doesn't just to be like a badass. He's quirky, and he could do it. So that's a good choice with those four. Big Show is just like a crowd pleaser just when he walks in because
Oh yeah, no. I think this was what Big Show turned the corner because people were like, "Oh, he's funny." And then you really tried to play into that on the wrestling show with his imitations and stuff post WrestleMania.
Tommy, did you have, I know you said your job was mostly done after that opening sketch, but like, did you have any input? Like, did The Rock seek your opinion on sketches? Like, hey, so we're doing this. What do you think? Should we punch this up? Like, were you involved sort of
Great question.
helping shepherd The Rock through this, knowing for him, they all knew you worked at Conan, I'm assuming.
Right.
That background. So were they leaning on you as far as, is this funny? Is this not funny? Did you even say that stuff, or were the SNL writers a little more protective? Like, what was that dynamic like? I'm just curious.
Well, the first dynamic was really me when he like left that first Monday, was me just kind of telling them like, yeah, this guy is completely capable. You know what I mean? There was a lot of that, like, because it was not too typical, because he left on Monday and wrestled, and I'm like, yeah, he can do that. You know what I mean? So it was more just like instilling confidence in them, like, no, the guy knows, he hits marks, he has comic timing, his whole fucking thing for the year, why he's huge, his speeches, he improvises on things, he, you know, he's gonna know timing, he's gonna remember his shit, he can do this kind of like, you know, whatever you can throw at him, you know what I mean? So like here and there, but I was more totally engrossed with that like opening and getting that already, but kind of keeping him like abreast of shit and saying like, oh, they don't want to do the Mary Catherine gal, I guess that's out or whatever. And so then things just kind of took their course, and it really went, I think, for the right, for most of the feedback I got was like, oh, this is pretty good. Because sometimes they get actors, whoever, like, oh, this fucker's kind of a dud, or they're not even necessarily a dud, but just because someone's like a fucking movie actor doesn't mean they can be like, oh, I'm live. And like I said, if you try to find the cue cards or whatever, you know what I mean? We've all seen like things go flat, you know, where it's like, oh, Christopher Walken's amazing because he's like, oh, he's a good weirdo that is into it. You know, other big actors have been very flat because it's like, oh, they just, it's a unique thing to be thrown in. And it's not like film acting or, you know, or a lot of things. So it pretty much was like that. And then, yeah, and then I was done completely, you know.
Were you in his dressing room for most of the show, or were you just kind of like, was he?
No, he was very active in the show if you look. So it was like a lot, you know, sometimes reminded me of like one of those Farley shows where like, oh, he's got to go here, he's got to change, he's got, you know what I mean? He was in some big costume changes all the way through it. So he was like all over the place, you know. I can't particularly remember. I was just like out in the halls and stuff, and then, you know, and then once that opening went, I was like, oh, cool. I mean, I don't, fuck, it can fall apart. It's not my fault anymore. You know, or, you know, but
Who just popped up? Oh,
what?
Oh,
That is a good looking
oh,
dog.
there's some a storm rolling through, and there was a little bit of thunder, and he, I think, got a little scared.
oh, my
Oh,
dog
This
isn't a fan of thunder either. What's your dog's name?
this is Gatsby. Oh, you
Oh,
little, and it's probably, yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
oh,
Wasn't even that loud.
you should name him Thunder. Ah, see,
Oh,
that's how comedy works, Rob.
you're the professionals. Well, you mentioned Christopher Walken. Christopher Walken actually guests next week or the following week on SNL, and it was the episode with the iconic cowbell sketch.
Was it
And
really?
we actually got a question from one of our hardcore attitudinals asking that Will Ferrell said that he had pitched the cowbell sketch 6 or 7 times before it finally made it with Christopher Walken, and they were wondering if Ferrell pitched the sketch to The Rock since it was the week before.
Well, I'm afraid I can't disclose that because I don't know.
Fair enough. Then ACDC played Shook Me All Night Long. And then the final sketch was Today's Lady, more of that great late 90s humor. The bit is that it's these radical feminists talking about how they live their lives as feminists and they don't need a man or whatever. And then The Rock's character shows up and he's this, you know, hunky bachelor. And they immediately drop the act and want to bone him, which it's like, okay, it's a game to play in a sketch.
I love your reaction.
All right.
okay.
There were some jokes, but this
Yeah.
wouldn't fly today.
You like that reaction? Yeah, just someone watching going, all right, I see what this
Yeah.
is.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, I understand the game here.
Oh, I connect these dots. Yeah.
Feminism is just when there's an ugly man looking at you, then
Yeah.
you could be feminist. But if it's a hot guy, forget about it.
Although my wife Allison worked on a show and she did come home and say, and Edge was a very handsome wrestler she worked with. She goes, oh my God, Edge came with his like, you know, long hair. And she goes, even the lesbians were drooling.
There was a Will Ferrell commercial for a old-fashioned horse glue, which did not feature The Rock, and that's our SNL episode. We did it.
Yeah. And then,
Nice job. Okay, nice job. Okay.
okay. Yeah.
No, but I thought overall it definitely holds up, especially like this was considered, I think, kind of like a weaker era for SNL. This moment into 2000 was like a transition. They were still transitioning through this cat, like figuring out their voices. I don't know. It was still very hit and miss during this era, but I think that this episode very much was a hit. I think it basically made The Rock's Hollywood career because after this is when he really started getting movie roles and proved
Yeah,
himself
there
to
was
Hollywood that he could hang.
yeah, there was nothing he did was embarrassing. It was just kind of like I think exactly that. And it was just like
Yeah.
tons of charisma on display. No, nothing weak, even though like things weren't great or whatever. There wasn't any big like
He didn't fumble
"Ew,"
any lines. He could read the
like
cue cards.
yeah,
And
yeah.
the show took care of him. Like I remember Tina Fey talked about always like wanting to take care of their guests and make sure that they don't look bad. And I really do think that they very much play to The Rock's strengths, the physical humor. He could sing. They let him sing. They didn't throw him out there to do, absurdist, weird stuff that he couldn't quite pull off and would look embarrassed. So everybody won here. This was a successful show.
Yep.
Where was the after party, Tommy? Did you go party after? Did you
Yeah,
celebrate?
I don't
Oh
remember
yeah.
I don't remember where it was. It was always just somewhere then, But yeah, that was
Were the
fun.
UCB parties kind of happening yet or not really? I would imagine they were at that point, but now I don't remember.
Were there simultaneous UCB SNL after
Well, there
parties
would be
or
like the SNL would have their after party, and then there'd be an after party, and
yeah.
it a lot of times
Yeah.
ended up at the UCB, the one on 22nd Street,
There always was an after somewhere. It was either at someone's
somewhere,
place
something.
or something, So it was all that was like always the fun thing of that. And then years later, you just go to the parties. Did you go to the show? No. Did you watch the show? No.
Yeah.
You went to the party.
Do you remember how like Vince or the wrestlers reacted after the show?
At Cloud9, everyone, and we got to remember too. They were like, okay, then this kind of made our work. Got to wrestle on Monday. Got to go the next day. So everything, the schedule was just ruthless.
Yeah,
But
the
it was
machine
like,
had to continue,
especially
right?
Vince was like, okay, like they had the table there at the after party. Oh, this was great, fantastic. All right, he was only there like an hour and he'd split, because just his agenda wherever where. But I lived in Manhattan at the time, so it was really fun for me. But yeah, everyone was Cloud9. It was just like another thing checked. This is going to be, and everyone knew it. Like even it said like these ratings will be huge, and they were. They were like double of any show of theirs. It was weird. It was just like everything was like just happening, and you just knew like, yep, watch this. ACDC, The Rock, it's gonna go. And even then just knew like, okay, they pulled it. It's weird. It's a little bit like working for wrestling. It's a little unsatisfying because it's not like always it was. And sometimes, John, I think you agree. Even working at Conan or shows, sometimes it's like the good feeling is like, whoo, nothing fucked up. Yes, you know what I mean. A lot of times it's fun and it's great, but often it's that like, oh, it was pulled off. Wow, you know what I mean? It's not like this. We
Well, it's
did a
such
show.
like the dynamic, the difference between, a weekly show and a nightly show is it's such a big difference. Like we would always joke about the notion of doing like an SNL type after party every single night after Conan. Like just every show we'd go out and everyone's just fucking exhausted.
Yeah,
It
hammered.
seems like, yeah, there would be, I don't know, for me, I never felt that. I remember Rachel Dratch actually, when she got SNL, she was so worried about, that thing, like, what if I don't get stuff on? What if I don't think of ideas? And for me, I never felt that just because it was so many good writers, performers there. It took the pressure off and you didn't have to come up with stuff every day,
Right.
and it was pretty collaborative and everyone had thick skin and no one was, people could fuck with each other. It was awesome.
And that's exactly how wrestling was when it worked great, when it was a small group. And that was the key thing at Conan too, because you could be like, I'm not contributing for these couple weeks because I'm fucked up in the head or something, but you'd always come up with an ending or you'd
Yeah.
contribute with something. And everyone was so collaborative, no one been like, oh, you're not going to talk about my ending, or I'm pitching a half-baked thing. I don't have any of it. And someone would
Jump
bail
in
you out,
and yeah.
and so you're just like constantly like, yeah, it was a team. And that was like wrestling. I always talk about the machine of like, how do we pull this off? Oh, we got, the fucking incredible crew, this director, this, all these people, and money was no object. And, like, do wild shit. And you just, and you had this ring and these performers like just ready to like run through a brick wall. So you had all this stuff, like all these tools, and you're right. The longer the show, then when you're working on sitcoms where it's like, oh God, it's longer and more introspective. And the worst of all time is working on creative for like commercials and stuff, something where there's so much money and you're being like, here's a team of people that are here to talk about the Nestle's Quick rabbit's ear, whether it should be the left one tilted here or this, or all the reasons why. And, oh, can we look at, 15 different mock-ups of the Nestle's Quick rabbit, and, oh, the nose, should it be, but that hair, does it look too much like then it's pure madness. It's like, like the shorter the time, the more time for production, and the more money, the fucking more fucked up it is. So that's why it always drew me to like, yeah, wrestling and Conan were always so fun. You had kind of like the luxury of failure, even if something like went fucky. Well, there's tomorrow.
Yeah, I always loved that. It just felt like you had to, well, you didn't have to, but we always tried stuff. You almost had no choice. Like there were certain things, and there was obviously things that just for me and you, like we had our Red Wings point counterpoint that we actually rehearsed, and then it was cut, and we actually didn't do it, which I still feel like, and I get it, but it was always great where you just had to try things, and and then you just sometimes don't know what's going to go well and what's not, and what's going to catch on, or, oh, let's do that again.
And from this, like doing this podcast with Rob, I always think like sometimes it's like, when you get retrospective and, oh, who wrote or came up with this? And I'm always kind of like, sometimes that's not the half of it. Like you get an idea, like everyone contributes, or the machine contributes. And then talking about this guy, Oldie Olson, he was so funny, and we used to put him in these situations with these incredible costumes, like he was erotic. Remember, like the erotic vampire? And just like that was 90% of it. Like he was so weird and odd with his glass eye, and then they put him in this incredible costume. And then, and sometimes we'd have it all set up, and then it'd be like, oh, what about the script for rehearsal? Like, oh, fuck. I'd run upstairs and write the script in 5 minutes. Like, oh, here it is. And then because the whole piece was him, and you knew that was the moving parts, that was the dynamics of it. And then after, some crew guy, who wrote that? Like, oh, I wrote that. It's just like, especially it gets more ridiculous in wrestling, where people are always like, oh, after the fact, years later, who came up with that? Agent, manager, all this shit. Where it's like, it happens sometimes, and sometimes, like, like I've destroyed fine writings with a glance towards the cue card and like a bad performance. Like, oh, writing destroyed. Who wrote? Yeah, right? Like,
I looked up the ratings, and first of all, the Daily News headline: The Rock helps SNL climb to ratings peak. It was an
nice headline.
8.2 rating, 21 share, which means 1 out of 5 people watching TV at the time were watching SNL, which is crazy. 20 million viewers.
Isn't that crazy?
For the show.
Can you imagine
what a time.
The Tonight Show gets what, like 700,000 a day, something like that.
Yeah, like I think now SNL, if they get 5 million, it's like, wow, we did it. So
it's crazy.
Yeah, that was The Rock hosting SNL. A little bit different of an episode than we typically do. But John, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with us and sharing these great stories of working in late night.
Oh yeah, for sure. I was I was here for the wrestling stories. I wanted to hear more personally.
You can hear it every week on Tales from the Attitude Era here, pal. This is our podcast.
We're going to debut a podcast of you watching this podcast, a reaction podcast.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, we need to do that.
Yeah.
And,
just hold it on my pillow. Just have it be this show.
Yeah.
And of course, if you're in New York City and you want a little more Jon Glaser in your life, August 7th at the Bell House, Soothing Meditations for the Solitary Dog, live and in person.
Maybe we could get a wrestler to come to your show and hit you with a chair.
What's that? Put a dog in a singlet.
Ooh. Why did it go up at the end like Johnny Carson? Ooh. Then at 8 p.m., Jon Glaser's new show, Dog in a Singlet, will be on our Viking Cruise Line's entertainment line.
Dog in a singlet, 2 bits.
Cut it, end it.
Rob, all right, that's the show, folks. Follow us on social media, TFT Attitude Era. Send us any feedback, tftattitudeera@gmail.com. We'll see you
End it.
next time
End
on
it.
Tales from the Attitude Era.